There you go. All righty. Good evening, everybody. We are back. This is the third and I believe final segment of the plagues. In all reality, though, we are looking at the plagues that God sent on the Egyptians, impacting their gods, things that they relied on. And then we're comparing those to today with the top 10 things that interfere with our relationship with God, or also take time from us, take time from our relationship with God. As we know, as a brief recap, there were 1 to 2 million Israelite slaves in Egypt. Moses was sent in. God worked through Moses with the different plagues. He confronted the pharaohs. All of these plagues, everything that was done was a direct affront to gods, little g gods, quote unquote, that the Egyptians worshipped. He was saying, look, these things, first of all, aren't gods, and second of all, they're not going to take care of you, and they can't take care of you. And that's why I'm relating all of the 10 different plagues back to the top 10 things that interfere with our relationship with God in the United States specifically. This came from a list. And all of this goes back to an overarching verse being Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, that states, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." That was referring to money there, but we can't serve two masters, no matter what it is. So, we have covered plagues 1 through 6. Let's jump into plague number 7. This one, it's some destructive stuff. We've really seen it here in East Tennessee. I know, oh goodness, 10 years ago or so was when we had that really bad hailstorm that came through and just demolished so much stuff. I know one of my co-workers, 2 sides of his house, every window was blown out from the hail. His car wasn't drivable. All the windows had been blown. Well, maybe not one side, but I know 3 sides of the windows were blown out. Hail can, first of all, destroy crops. It can kill birds. And if it's big enough, it can kill an animal or a human. But also fire along with it. So we had hail and fire. This was covered in Exodus 9:13 through 35. Now, this was a direct affront to multiple quote-unquote gods. And let's see here. Those gods were, by pelting the land of Egypt with a plague of catastrophic hail, God was assaulting the Egyptian gods of the atmosphere and weather, as well as the earth and all it contains. As the plague beat down on the earth, the Egyptian sky god Nut and the storm god Seth, supposedly associated with strange and frightening events, weren't able to do anything with it. And the god Shu, god of the air, could not lift a finger. All right, so if you back up and look at that, those quote-unquote little g guys, the one that's kind of like it's standing on its tippy toes and standing on its fingers is actually the god of the sky goddess Nut. Now, I don't know, was there another one there, honey, that had bingo? The god of the air, Shu, is the one holding her up there. Now, the one at the bottom is not Seth. That is can't remember his name, but he is the god of the earth, quote unquote. So there we go. This what God was saying, look, they are not going to be able to stop this. Can you imagine all right, we've already had the plague we've already had frogs, we've had flies, we're coming up, I believe, on locusts, we've had all this hail. Wonder what they're thinking they're going to be eating. Because if anything growing, it could be destroyed. If you think about it, it could kill off plants and bushes for years. If it stripped them of all their leaves or bark or so forth, there's no telling how long it would take them to recuperate from all of that. And when we compare that to the things that get in our way here in the United States in 2020s, the number 4 item on the list as we move up to number 1, the number 4 item was, the number 4 thing that gets in our way is people's pursuit and desire of power and control. It basically states that it can lead to individuals to prioritize these things over integrity and positive influence. We have some verses that warn us about this. Matthew 20, 25 through 28 says in there, Jesus contrasts the Gentile rulers who lord it over their people with the followers, stating that the greatest among them will be their servants. We also have Matthew 23, 11 through 12, Jesus criticizes the Pharisees for seeking positions of honor and authority while neglecting their duties, and emphasizing that those who exalt themselves will be humbled. How many times do we talk about humility? Does Jesus talk about humility? Do the apostles talk about humility? Again and again and again, it is stressed how we are to be humble. And in Luke 22 there, it talks about how Jesus emphasizes true leadership is about serving and not being served. Now, as we move on, I spoke a minute ago about locusts. You know, we've had locusts here in the United States as well. In the Midwest, not in a very, very long time. Most of them have been killed off, quite frankly. Karen, do you have the slide for that with the picture? That is actually a modern day in, I think it was Ethiopia. Look at the number of locusts in that picture. Now that's, locusts are, I don't know if they're actually grasshoppers or if there's a certain type of grasshopper that is referred to as a locust or vice versa. I'm not 100% sure, probably should have looked that up. But anyway, we do have this plague goes directly against a deity in the form of a cat who is supposed to be the protector of crops from rodents. And Bestet, B-E-S-T-E-T, is the name of that god, which is their quote-unquote. I really hate saying God. I really need, I don't know, I just feel weird saying that, calling them gods, but little g God sounds so much better. But that was the one there on, if your screen been on the left. And also Osiris, the god of agriculture. Neither one of them could do much about it. Osiris also was considered the ruler of death and life and of sprouting vegetation, and legend had it that Osiris was the one that developed agriculture in Egypt. So now what do we have? We have them going, God going, where are your gods? Those locusts, we have to be honest, they would wipe every piece of vegetation off everything. Famine was a huge concern. Huge concern. Nothing was growing. What about What about all the reeds and everything along the Nile? Talking about completely changing the flood stages and everything of the Nile. You had nothing to hold it back. You had nothing to control its flow. All right. To be blunt, I don't know how they weren't pretty petrified by the future of this point. Not just the plagues, but everything going on and what it meant for the years coming for the Egyptians. All right, how does that contrast with our next quote-unquote plague or item in the United States that was ranked third as interfering with our relationship with God? Okay. Approval and recognition. That's kind of interesting, but a lot of people do think, think about TikTok, think about YouTube, think about whatever you want, Facebook, any of this social media stuff, people seeking recognition or seeking approval. One of the worst things, in my opinion, about social media is the whole seeking approval thing as well. You don't have to listen to anyone that doesn't absolutely agree with you. Matter of fact, the logarithms are set up to feed you more of what you think. So you can run down this dark rabbit hole. That's how we get these extremists. They're not exposed to other viewpoints. And quite frankly, that does temper. That does other people's viewpoints, and talking to people tempers people's reactions oftentimes. A lot of people also focus on external validation rather than internal fulfillment. No offense, if you're not happy with yourself already, other people telling you how great you are or aren't is probably not going to help much. And where does that come from, quite frankly? Where does inner peace come for us? It comes from God. And we see so many people today seeking it elsewhere. We have some different verses that are related specifically to that. Galatians 1 and 10, Paul was saying, am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. There's even in greater, and I quote-unquote Christendom, there are people that they're going to preach whatever the people want to hear, so they have more people in the seats, more money in the coffers, more money they get, or more prestige they get. It happens. Paul here was saying this was happening there in Galatia. And he was right in the church at Galatia. And he's like, what do you expect? I'm not trying to, in essence, these people are just trying to win your approval. I'm telling you the truth, in essence. In 1 Thessalonians 2:4, he says, on the contrary, we speak of those approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We are not trying to please people, but God, who tests our hearts. And I'd be honest with you, one of the most mic drop moments in all of the Bible to me, point blank. Every time I read this, I'm like, man, that's Acts chapter 5. When Peter and the other apostles were in front of the Sanhedrin, and the Sanhedrin were threatening them, going, you stop talking about Jesus, you quit preaching this Jesus, or we're going to basically get you, we're going, And we do know later that Stephen was stoned, obviously, and killed. But what do they say to them? What does Peter say to the Sanhedrin? Now, this is the governing body of all Jews. This is the Sadducees, made up of the scribes, the Sadducees, and the Pharisees. He says, who must we obey? Oh, actually, he says, we must obey God rather than human beings. He just told them, yeah, that ain't going to happen. You can say what you want. We're going to obey God. That's why I talk about a mic drop moment. I can almost see him going, See you later. Or, literal mic drop, since they didn't have mics back then. Maybe the bullhorn drop, But it's a powerful statement he made there. And we should be making the same statement. We should not be worried about people and what they... I was about to say what they think of us. We need to say what we say and do what we do in love and humility. That doesn't mean we should be trying to make them like us for what we say. We shouldn't change what we say. We should be true to the Scriptures. We know that God validates us by knowing us intimately and personally. We know that Psalms 56:8, sometimes I do that, tells us that God keeps track of our sorrows and collects our tears. Wow. He cares so deeply for us that he said, hey, cast your worries on me. Cast your anxieties on me. 1 Peter chapter 5. God's the creator of the universe here, y'all. Creator of everything. Holds everything together. Knows everything about everyone on this planet. And cares that much about each and every one of us individually. It should be awe-inspiring. And quite frankly, should be all that we need. He also does some things that sometimes we think, whoa, because we do run into some hardships sometimes, don't we? Sure. He's been called the master gardener, right? There in John chapter 15 where he talks about how he prunes and shapes us so we can live an abundant life. Cuts off branches, takes things away, shapes us, molds us. But we should be seeking our approval in God, not in the world. Now the next one. This one had to freak him out a little bit. Darkness. Darkness comes upon the land. Exodus 10:21 through 29. Whew. Okay. Several gods there. Ra, obviously, the biggest and the most powerful God that they had a head of a falcon and a body of a human. He's also a lot of times shown in a sun as a sun, S-U-N. Now the sun there with all the things, the rays coming out of that is the god Aton, Aton, A-T-O-N, excuse me. And it's depicted by a circular yellow sun with rays emitting from the discs that are supposed to be like human hands. Horus was the other one on the far side there. It's portrayed as a falcon with the right eye of the sun or the morning star, representing power and quintessence, representing power. Ancient Egyptians thought Ra had the power to control the sky and the weather as well as life and death. Pretty much over pretty much everything. Literally can control the sky, the weather, which are other gods. So he's controlling other gods as well. And completely over life and death. Okay, that's pretty heavy. Can you imagine the sun going out and not just an eclipse? Think about that one. Uh-oh, what's going on here? Eclipses only last for a small period of time, not like here. Now it's getting a little more personal for us in the things that we allow to take precedence over God in our lives. And quite frankly, getting a little uncomfortable when I was looking at some of these things. Some of the other stuff, I'm not into others' approvals as much, and selfies and all this sort of stuff. But now the number two thing that stands in the way of our relationship with God is comfort and security. Yeah, we all kind of like that, don't we? We all kind of like that comfort and security. And they say the strong desire for a comfortable and secure life can overshadow deeper needs and purposes, potentially leading to a lack of growth or encouragement with important issues. We've been warned about relying on uncertain riches, haven't we? Sure. 1 Timothy 6, 17 through 19, warns us about putting hope in uncertain wealth and encouraging God and trust in God's provisions. Proverbs 23, 4 and 5. Proverbs, not Psalm. Some of you are like, Proverbs 23, oh yeah. No, that's Psalm 23. But Proverb 23, the proverb itself illustrates the fleeting nature of wealth. I didn't realize I had that one up there. She just put that one up there. But it says, do not wear yourself out to get rich. Do not trust your own cleverness. Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone. For they will surely sprout wings and fly off to the sky like an eagle. Y'all, I hate to say it, I'm not trying to be anything, but we do live in a very precarious world. We may not think about it. It would take 2 nuclear weapons to explode in the atmosphere in the United States, one on the East Coast and one in the far Midwest, to utterly make every device that has a computer chip in it never functional again. Think about that. Think about that. How are you going to get that money out of that 401k if that happens? By the way, your refrigerator ain't going to work either. By the way, your phone ain't either. By the way, your thermostat isn't going to either. Now, we don't like to think about those things. Yeah, definitely don't like to think about that sort of thing. But it's true. The electromagnetic pulse from 2 nuclear weapons could literally wipe out every IC chip in the United States and Canada and most of Mexico. So what are we relying on? What are we relying on? If something were to happen tomorrow and your 401k went away, what are you relying on? Or your retirement or whatever it may be went away. It's going to be hard, but what are you going to focus on? Are you going to go crazy running around, or are you going to focus on God? Which is where we should be focusing to begin with. We know in Matthew 6, 19 through 21, it says, do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and vermin destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. It's pretty blunt, Hebrews 13:5 links contentment with freedom from the love of money. Now that's of course the love of money, not just money. We have to have money to operate in today's society, but the love of it, the chasing of it. It says, keep your lives free from the love of money and contentment with what you have, and be content with what you have. Because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. Would you be able to, if something catastrophic happened, like I was mentioning you, say, well, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I know one of these days I'm going to be in heaven and God's got it under control. Also Matthew 6, 31 through 34. Of course, there's so much right there in that section of Matthew. But Jesus says, don't worry, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? What shall we wear? For the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows what you need then, that you need them. But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as always. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Okay, now we're getting to the last one. And every plague before this has been a prelude. Basically, God has been brushing aside all of the little g Egyptian gods. And He saved, I don't want to say the best for last, but He saved the most brutal, I would say, for last. And who does that affect? Well, it affects everyone there. The 10th plague, death of the firstborn. Okay. First of all, this was a direct repayment to Pharaoh. Remember, when Moses was born, Pharaoh was having all of the Jewish boys killed. Wasn't he? The 10th plague was a direct strike against Pharaoh himself and his line. Egyptian pharaohs were considered gods and deities and descendants of gods, but none could withstand God's destroying angel. In the Book of the Dead, the Pharaoh says, I am decreed to be the heir, the Lord of the earth of Jeb. I have union with women. Jeb hath refreshed me, and he hath caused me to ascend his throne. Literally. He was a God on earth. It was a little g God on earth. And he couldn't do anything. His own son died. By the way, you know, this was first born not of just human, cattle, all of that. I mean, it was, and y'all know the whole Passover story that's associated with this, why it didn't happen to the Israelites, because of the blood on the lamb on the door frame. Thank you. I could see it, just couldn't say it. And so, but keep in mind too, any of those Israelites that did not do that, guess what? Their firstborn was dead. Okay, so what is the number one thing? The number one plague that if God was to, the thing He could do most to this world, or at least this country, remember this list is this country, USA. What is the number one thing He would, I guess you could say, attack? Y'all probably got a guess, don't you? I got a bunch of stone faces here going, we ain't talking. Oh, for Edith Butler to still be with us. She always spoke up. Money and wealth was the number one thing that stood in the way, in Americans' way of God, of time for God. It said the pursuit and acquisition of wealth can become excessively focused. We can become very focused on it, leading to obsession and potentially compromising ethical values also, and neglecting other important aspects of both our physical and spiritual life. Y'all have heard of people that have worked themselves to death. Y'all probably know people that have worked 60, 70 hours a week. I used to do it. Glad I don't anymore. But you know, 1 Timothy 6, 9 through 11 tells us those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. But you, man of God, flee from all of this and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Okay. Great. By the way, it says the love of money, not money. God's not going to check our bank account. Okay? But He does know where its importance is in our heart. You know, we're like, well, you know, I could give. I'm not going to give. You know, I need my money, or I'm only going to give the bare minimum. I've always equated it to, you have your hand like this, and all of your possessions and money in your hand. Is it like this and open for God to use and to expand, quite frankly? Or are you holding on to it, not wanting to get rid of any of it, treasuring it and holding it tight? I mean, that's how I've always visualized it. Maybe that helps for you. Your relationship with money might be veering into love of money if you let a paycheck direct your decisions rather than God. Money makes you anxious and fearful. You've become obsessive about building wealth. You've cheated, lied, or stolen to acquire wealth. You feel stingy. You don't pay your tithes or offering. You pursue security and comfort over God's plan and purposes for your life. Now, this was what a list I found. Now, you don't pay your tithes and offering. We've talked about tithing. We are not called to tithe per se. A tithe is a certain percentage. That is OT, covenant number 1, nation of Israel. Covenant number 2, we are instructed to give as we are blessed. But it does not say you're supposed to give X amount. Okay? And I say this, I know y'all know that. If you've ever been anywhere and they tell you you're supposed to give a certain percentage, they're either ill-informed or purposely misleading you. It's what it is. Would you put up the picture of the professor there, Karen? George Santayana. He actually said, those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. The quote is more likely due to writer and philosopher George Santayana, and its original form it read, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Why do I bring this up? Exodus 20, verse 1. And God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. God was not just showing the Egyptians that He was bigger than all of their gods. He was showing the Israelites too. They had to know about all of these gods. And I guarantee you some of them probably even made the mistake of worshiping them. We know it didn't take the Israelites long to be complaining. They didn't have their cucumbers and they weren't where they wanted to be, so they made a golden calf to worship. When they had God literally in the form of a pillar of smoke and a pillar of fire guiding them out of Egypt, guiding them across the Red Sea, destroying Pharaoh and all of the armies chasing them, literally bringing them water, bringing them manna. Then when they got too complaining, giving them quail and letting them get sick and on and on. That's a warning to us because we as human beings are fickle. I hate to say it, we're fickle. We have to work to stay focused on God and putting Him as our priority and having no other gods before Him. We saw what God did to the Egyptian gods. And then we talked about 10 things here in the United States that could become, quote unquote, little g gods to us. Things that we rely on and chase. We need to be careful about that. We need to make sure we put God first, and that we have no other gods before Him. Thank you, and hope you have a wonderful evening. Good night. Sorry I went a little long, y'all.